Hello and welcome to the NBA presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Also hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. And first-time OTG guest, Matthew Peoples. What's up, guys?
What's going on, man?
You know, there's a lot of processes, and this is the one I trust right here.
That's what we like to hear.
That was one of your best jokes, Kory. I think that might be your best intro right there. But Kory nailed it. We're talking trust the process today. Sixers at number 19 in the OTG rankings. Our writers came up with these. We'll discuss the ranking in a little bit, but let's talk Sixers last season. What are your thoughts on this team? How excited were you, Matt, about what they did last year?
It was weird because I actually enjoyed watching the Sixers do the whole basketball thing for the first time in a while. They were somewhat competitive for, a good part of the season when a young man named Joel Embiid was out there. But even when they weren't, they had, fun guys to watch, Dario and Rashawn and those guys like that. You always had some sort of entertainment, and it was different than a lot of those the dreary process years.
Off 31 games, Joel Embiid almost won Rookie of the Year. I mean, that almost says it for itself. A team that's been, like you said, Matt, not the greatest of teams to watch on the basketball court for the last several years. Joel Embiid in 31 games gave pretty much an entire fan base a boost in confidence. It gave, the viewing fan like myself who doesn't watch the Sixers on an everyday night, that there's the process is certainly in the right direction.
Yeah, Embiid was great. You guys mentioned it. Even though he only was able to play 30-plus games, you were still able to see that potential and the flashes of greatness. What are your thoughts on Embiid? How great a player can he be? Is this an MVP candidate we're talking about? Is this a top 5 center? What are your thoughts on him, Matt?
I think it's hard to say that he can't be. He offers essentially everything you need out of a basketball player, whether you need defense at the rim, defense on the perimeter, you need somebody to switch onto a guard. He can do all that on that side of the floor. And then you go and, he's shooting threes, he's posting up, he's got a face-up game, he's finishing around the rim. There's basically everything you need out of your first option, your star player. He offers. Again, it all comes down to that H word, health, and it's yet to be seen, but you got to stay optimistic because there's not much else you can do with this guy.
I mean, in his per 36 numbers, Joel Embiid would have averaged 28, 11, and 3.5 blocks per game. If he can, like you said, Matt, stay on the floor, if he can be an everyday center, he doesn't have to play 36 minutes, but if he can play in the upwards of 30 to 32 minutes per game, yeah, Nick, I definitely think Joel Embiid could be a top 5 center in this league and possibly one day an MVP candidate.
It all comes down to the health. We hate to see that with a player, but if Embiid is healthy, he's looking like a top 5 center. Like Matt said, the thing about him is his versatility and the impact he can provide on the game from multiple angles. But who would be the highlight player other than Embiid?
If I had to pick somebody, I think it comes down to Dario Saric after 41 games in. The beginning of the season, he was a young European rookie coming over, learning the league, and having a hard time adjust. The NBA is taller, faster, stronger, more skilled. So I think his first 40 games were him kind of feeling out where he was, what he's capable of doing, and what his role was on the team. When he first came in, the first game against Oklahoma City, he started next to Joel Embiid. So, he went from a starter to they traded for Ersan, the Ersan being the starter. Now he's a backup, just trying to learn that role. And then Joel goes down, and finally he gets starter minutes, and he's getting touches. So seeing Dario kind of take steps that you want to see from a rookie throughout the season was a pretty nice treat.
Dario is a great choice, Matt, especially with how he stepped up when Embiid went down. I'm rolling with Robert Covington. I think last season we finally saw Robert Covington kind of get the credit he's due. The Sixers aren't that good normally. They haven't been that fun to watch. And Embiid really put a spotlight on them for guys like Robert Covington to shine. Dario, for even in a certain stretch of the season last year, TJ McConnell had a nice little stretch there. Covington's a very good 3-and-D player. We saw him hit some big time shots last year. One that sticks out to me is the game-winning 3 he hit against the Portland Trailblazers.
Trailblazers?
But, he's definitely
Yep. Yeah.
I think Covington took a lot of good steps last year.
Yeah, honestly, both guys, and like you said, they have TJ McConnell, Riquen Holmes. There's some guys on the team that are pretty good young pieces. I'm going to go with Saric because I liked what I saw with him. Like you guys said, after Embiid was out, seemed like a good all-around basketball player, and he could be definitely a nice bench piece in the future for the Sixers. But biggest disappointment for the Sixers last year. What kind of let you down other than Embiid's health? Because that's just the easy choice. I'm trying to make this hard.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm down for this challenge. I would say, other than Embiid tearing the meniscus or the slight meniscus tear or whatever the Sixers PR staff wants to make up, I would have to say it was probably Nerlens trade. I mean, after watching how his contract situation played out, and obviously hindsight is 2020, you see he signed for the qualifying offer. He took like 2-3 million, which would have been a perfectly fine contract to have him on with the Sixers. They kind of felt like they had to trade him because you don't really want to offer an enormous contract to a guy who's going to be your backup. Generally speaking in the NBA. The difference with the Sixers is the guy he's backing up has played 31 games in 3 seasons. So it's kind of fair to an extent to give some money to a backup who will be doing more than typical backups do. And Nerlens has such an immense value in today's NBA just by the fact that he is, relating his skill set to a lot of what championship teams need. He's your Tristan Thompson. He's your Andrew Bogut. He's your, all those elite level teams have that defensive anchor in the paint. And I feel like the trade and what they got back for him, which was the make-believe first. I don't know if you guys remember this, but essentially they got a first from the Dallas Mavericks that the Dallas Mavericks would have had to have won out for the rest of the season in order for it to convert to the Sixers. And even if they won out, they may not have gotten it. So it converts to 2 second-rounders and Justin Anderson, who's a piece, but when you're giving up a guy like Nerlens who does have some solid value, it was a tough pill to swallow to see him go in that package.
Man, Matt, first, I want to appreciate you throwing me this alley-oop because this is now extremely easy for me. I'm going
right
with
off the glass, dude. Right off the glass.
I'm going with the center that they probably should have traded, the 2015 number 3 pick, Jahlil Okafor. I think, it's safe to say at this point in his career after 2 years, this was probably the worst center on the team. After his first season, Okafor's numbers dropped to last season across the board. He got less playing time last year. Okafor is still decently offensively, but, defensively, this is a guy who constantly gets beat on backdoor screens. He's just lazy. He for a guy who's 7 foot, he should probably be better around the rim, and he's not. So for me, Okafor is definitely the biggest disappointment last year on this young team.
Yeah, I mean, that whole situation you could kind of say was a disappointment. Like you said, Matt, with Noel is never really getting the value that they wanted for him. And they kind of got put in a weird situation because, I felt like he didn't really strive until later into the season, so they weren't able to trade him early on. And there was obviously the injury history with him, so it kind of made it hard to move him. And like Kory, like you said, Okafor was trash, and they weren't really able to get any good value for him. And they probably still tried to move him this summer, and nothing really, evolved from that. So that whole center situation, as long as Embiid's healthy, though, none of this will really matter.
Agreed. And honestly, it's crazy. Jalil's approaching a point where you're going to be sending a pick with him to get him off your team. Obviously you could let him go out and not pick up his option at the end of the season, but it's a number 3 overall pick. That's a bad look for an organization. It's really getting to a point where he's just a cap hold, and you may need to send out an asset just to move on from him.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, I saw something this summer that he lost some weight. What do you guys expect out of Okafor this season? Do you think that he's going to step up, or he's going to, be like Matt said, end up being a salary dump somewhere and having to give up an asset to move him?
I'm at a point where, although the preseason and the season's fast approaching, I wouldn't be shocked to see a little Shams bomb that just says Jahlil Okafor has been moved to wherever, Sixers send a second-round pick. It's at a point where you're doing a disservice to yourself and you're doing a disservice to this young guy by just keeping him on a roster that he has no place being on, and he can't offer anything to you, and you can't really offer much to him. I think it's best for both parties to find a way to separate as soon as possible. But if he is on the roster, just spot minutes if Joel might be injured. You can't really expect a lot out of the guy, and it's really a shame to say that for a former number 3 overall pick.
Seeing comments he's made in the media, he constantly says how much he loves being a Sixer, how much he loves being in Philly. So for me, I just want to see it. Getting Ben Simmons back this year, drafting Markelle Fultz. There's definitely a lot of not big talent, but a lot of good younger talent than Okafor. Probably more NBA ready, or at least can maybe show that they're better NBA players than Okafor at this point. I think Okafor. Oh God, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I think Okafor at this point in his career He could probably become like a Greg Monroe because offensively, this guy is very talented. Defensively, though, I'd rather watch paint dry.
Yeah. Defensively, he has some issues, and he hasn't been the consistent player that they've wanted. It's been interesting to see what'll happen with him. And like you said, Matt, I wouldn't be surprised. There's always been like mention of Chicago being interested in him. And obviously, going through a rebuild, that would kind of make sense.
And they
But we'll
love
see
making
what
horrible
happens.
trades, so that'd be great.
But let's talk rankings. Sixers at number 19. This is a fair ranking, too high or too low? What are your thoughts?
It's the Sixers are probably the most difficult team in the league to give a ranking to, just because it's so boom or bust. Their position is so volatile, just because of if Ben Simmons comes in and he's able to assimilate to the league and give a realistic, fair output that you would expect from a top level pick, and Markelle can contribute and score in bunches and show flashes that he can be good, but without being relegated to just another rookie. And if Joel can come out and crush the earth like he did last year in 31 games, they could be a top 5 seed in the East, 6 seed in the East. If Joel goes down in the first 10, 15 games and Ben's underperforming, he's not comfortable in his role, same with Markelle, I can see this team in the lottery again, in the top part of the lottery. But so I would say that's a pretty fair ranking just for how all over the board they could be.
19 is my favorite number, first off. A little fact there. For me, I think this number is pretty fair. If you look on paper, this has got to be one of the top 3 NBA cores in the league, if not the best. There's a ton of promise on this roster. If these guys all pan out, if we see Embiid healthy, if we see Fultz and Simmons contribute early, this team could probably be even a little bit higher on this list. I don't know if I would say they're a 5 seed in the East. That's got to be like best case scenario. I do think they're a playoff team this year, right around the 8 or 7 seed. I think they'll be battling all year as long as they stay healthy. 19, though, at this point is really fair for the process.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you guys mentioned, just there's so much flip-flop with them. They could be a lot higher. They could be a lot lower. It's all about the young talent and how they react their first year in the NBA. The thing with the Sixers is they're depending a lot on rookies. But it's a weird situation where they have two number 1 overall picks, possibly starting for them this year. So it's something different, and that kind of makes it even more intriguing. But talking about number 1 overall picks, let's talk additions. The Sixers made a trade for the number 1 pick, and they drafted Markelle Fultz. What are your thoughts on him?
I think it was the perfect Sam Hinkie move minus Sam Hinkie. It was, you have all these assets, and they're not just to keep accumulating assets. They're to cash in your chips and go for that big bang purchase. And I think Markelle was the ideal fit for that. He's under contract for 7 more years, technically, based on all the contract ramifications that come from getting drafted. And, it's not an older guy who could leave or an older guy who doesn't fit your timeline. It really is kind of the perfect thing to go for. And, it's kind of funny to say that moving up 2 spots is worth, almost every high-level asset you have. But going from 3 to 1 is going from Carmelo Anthony to LeBron James. Not to say that Carmelo's although I think he was 64 in the rankings or something like that, something ridiculous. But
we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, just it's such a huge difference that I think it's worth the risk to take to see if Markelle can turn into a franchise point guard.
Yeah, I love Markelle Fultz. I'm talking about a guy who averaged 23, 5, and 5 in college. Very versatile. The 3-point shot, if he can hit it consistently. I mean, this guy, I think, is going to come into the NBA and immediately make an impact. He's put on muscle in this offseason. He's been working hard. This is a top 3 candidate of mine for the Rookie of the Year race this season. And probably at this point in time, my favorite to win it.
What are your thoughts on Fultz? How much do you think he'll contribute this season? If you had to predict, let's assume that he's going to start, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But give me a prediction of what his stat line might look like this season. I know it's a tough one, but.
No, that's awesome. All right, well, it's tough because I'm pretty sure Markelle is like 14 years old. But, I think he's like 18 or 19, something like that, something insane. See Markelle's kind of rookie year going a lot like, oh my God, I can't believe he just did that. And then, oh my God, did he just do that? Like it'll flip flop between those 2 extremes where one time down the court, he comes down and he crosses Kyrie, comes in and has a ridiculous finish. And then the next one down totally blows a rotation for a key basket. And, I think he'll see a lot of his minutes diminish in crunch time where they might go to, a more reliable older veteran option in a Jared Bayless or maybe a TJ McConnell. But I think it's going to be a lot of that. You'll see flashes of what he can do, but again, he's a young guy, and he's going to mess up, and you just got to take the good with the bad. If I had to go stat line, something fair, 13 points a game, maybe 2 or 3 rebounds, not a ton, and I think comfortably about 5 assists a game, and that would be a great stat line for me on about 44% shooting from the field and 35% from three.
I think Fultz will be on the court a lot of the time. I do think Ben Simmons will run the show more times than not over Fultz. I think Fultz a lot of the time will be used as a kind of isolation. I'm going to get you a bucket type of point guard. I do think he'll create a little bit, but I think Ben Simmons has the ability, or as he's been compared to one of the greatest, the greats in the league, LeBron James, by being all around versatile. He can dunk, he can rebound, he can play make. Guessing of a full stat line, I'm saying that it's 17 points per game, four rebounds, and probably 4.5 to 5 assists, shooting 44
I thought I was a Sixers
43%. I'm high on him, man. Especially putting in the work and putting on.
I like it.
Because he's so young. I really like that I saw him put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. That's so important for a guy his young. If you can get the body, and you have the raw skill. I just think it will translate pretty well with the young pieces around him.
So give me a percentage on the chances that Markelle Fultz wins Rookie of the Year.
To me, he's probably the third most likely behind Ben and Lonzo Ball as of right now.
I'm going to say that he's got a 67% chance of being Rookie of the Year.
Wow. Kory's going all in on Markelle Fultz.
I'm feeling hot.
Is he paying you under the table?
No, I'm like I said, this is the one process I actually trust. I just think having a center like Embiid down low to dish it off to, who's probably going to be the primary scoring option, a guy like Ben Simmons, who you always have to account for, having a 3-and-D shooter in Robert Covington, having now J.J. Redick, we'll talk about, also in the corner 3-point shooting. I don't know. I just think this team is – I don't know how many games they're going to win, but I just think there's a lot of pieces that a guy like Fultz can really take advantage in a rookie season. Because he's got a better supporting cast than I think Lonzo has in L.A.
True, good point.
Yeah, definitely be fun to watch. A lot of interesting rookie situations this year, especially with point guards possibly getting big minutes. But the Sixers also made a trade later in the draft for Anze Knicks, center, international guy. He probably will spend a year over there, maybe come over in a year or two. What are your thoughts on him?
Guys, what you're looking at is a guy who has the potential to be the best basketball player to touch a ball. No, he's a boomer bust pick. He's a late first rounder. He got compared a lot to a Kristaps Porzingis. I'm pretty sure it's because he's tall and Latvian. That's probably where the delineation exists. I mean, he can hit the three a little bit. He shows some ability to stroke from three, and I think he's about 7'3", so he's a really tall guy, and he's fairly mobile for his size. I love the pick. I love moving up in the late first round and just kind of taking a gamble. I think the two best ways to use a late first round pick is go all in, boom or bust. If it doesn't work out, cut your losses. And I think it's a good way to utilize that, and it was a good move.
I just love the comparison. They always seem to compare the same type of players to the other type of players in the league, like for rookies. Comparisons always, they always make me laugh because O.J. Mayo at one time was the next LeBron James, and that's kind of those kind of comparisons always make me laugh. Like you said, he'll be overseas for another year. He'll have more time to develop. I do think, we'll see him at some point in time, even in the G League, before we see him probably on an NBA team. But it's definitely a nice piece to have, especially if you have an injury to Embiid or you have stuff go wrong with the other big men. Having guys like him overseas in the lurking could be pretty good, especially when you have Okafor, who's like you said, Nick, early in the pod, absolute trash.
I forgot about that. That just sounded extra harsh when you said it. But no, I like this.
Let it rip.
I like this pick as well. He's more a defensive-minded guy who's going to do like the dirty work for you. So he kind of projects to be maybe Embiid's backup in the future, which would be a great pick for the Sixers. They also had two picks in the second round as well, Jonathan Bolden and Matthias Lesor. either of these guys stick out to you, or do you think, they'll spend time in the G League or internationally?
I'm super high on Jonah Bolden. Going into the draft, I had him probably going around that late first round. So when he was available, I think mid second round, early second round when they got him, I thought it was a total steal. And then he kind of reinforced that belief in summer league. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure he shot the ball every single time he touched it, which is for shooters shoot. The camp of J.R. Smith would be proud, but like was after it on the defensive end. He's chasing blocks. He's able to move his feet. He's switching on pick and rolls, and he just looked comfortable. Not that he's going against elite level competition, but he shows the foundation to be a definite role player. And I think he'll come over in a year or two, and I think you'll see a lot of G League time. But he could be somebody that gets ushered into a real Sixers rotation in the next couple of years.
Let me say this: if Okafor craps the bed out the gate here, if he struggles, they will probably do everything they can to get rid of Okafor just to get Jonah Bolden on this roster. I mean, this kid, like you said, Matt, absolutely killed it in summer league. Obviously he shot the ball a ton, but besides averaging 10 points per game, he averaged 5.3 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2.3 blocks. I mean, just right off the bat, that's more defense than Okafor has played probably his entire collegiate and
the Bash
so far
Okafor
NBA career. Yeah, we're out for blood. Plata o plumo, as they would say in Narcos. I definitely think I definitely think Bolden has a lot of upside. He plays really hard. There's a couple dunks he had in summer league where he might have killed a person. I'm not sure if they're out of the hospital yet. I really like him.
I think Kory's, jumping on that Sixer bandwagon. But
I love it,
let's
dude.
talk
We got
also.
room over here.
You got room. Yeah, no, I think it's going to start, getting a little bit more packed over there. We'll definitely see some people jump over it and Embiid stays healthy. But let's talk additions. You mentioned him before, JJ Redick. That was a pretty big signing. This is the biggest signing for the Sixers in quite some time. So what were your thoughts on that, Matt?
To me, it was, obviously a great basketball move. He's gonna space the floor. He's gonna show veteran leadership. He's gonna be somebody that's gonna draw a lot of gravity as you chase him off of screens. And I think he'll be the perfect kind of release valve for the attention that guys like Ben Simmons, Markelle, and Joel are gonna get. But as a Sixers fan and somebody who kind of had to tough it out through, a 10-win season just a year or two ago, it's kind of cool that he's not a big name free agent, but just a notable player. Looked at the Sixers and said, I want to play basketball there. Now, granted, he had 23 million reasons why he might want to come play here. But, you still got to, respect the situation. And I think he did, and that's what drew him over here. So it was just kind of a cool thing to see a notable free agent come over to the Sixers.
I mean, the one thing J.J. Redick really wanted was to get paid, and he absolutely got paid. I'm not sure if he'll be a Sixer long-term. I'm not sure if this is a one-year deal or if maybe he'll go back to ring chasing next year after, failing out in L.A. But certainly for the Sixers, you got to love being able to get a veteran, first off, around this young core and a guy who still at, going to be 33 can play NBA-level basketball. Last year, he did cool off to end the season. I know that for me personally, he was killing me on FanDuel nightly because he was pretty cheap, and I always had faith in JJ, and he let me down more times than not. But for this team, obviously he takes up $23 million, but there's no one else on this roster even taking up that much money at this point in time. So all the kids are selling their rookie deals. A 3-point shooter like Redick, though, I don't think you could go wrong with this move.
Yeah, I think it just checks so many marks. It's everything's just such a pro when you look at it. The 1-year deal, they keep their cap flexibility. They don't have the money. They don't have players they need to really sign this year anyways. He fits the need of 3-point shooting. Offensively, they struggled and they needed a floor spacer. Checks that. The veteran leadership, he checks that. And he's a high basketball IQ guy. He's a defender, but he knows how to play defense and position his body. He can kind of teach the young guys how to play. So I love the signing, and I thought that was a great move for the Sixers. And it could be a move that actually helps them make the playoffs, instead of just missing out.
Yeah, agreed. LeBron will love seeing this kind of team.
But let's talk Amir Johnson. Another 1-year deal, another veteran brought in. What are your thoughts on him?
Amir really is a $12 million professor, a teacher. He's there to kind of just show these young guys how to play. Maybe he'll for his ears from this podcast and just try to coax him into believing he's a serviceable player. He's going to be there to help these young guys through the rifts and the tides of the season. And I think it's a nice signing. You had some cap space to use. The only thing I would have had against it is Robert Covington is yet to receive a contract extension. And, this $11-12 million that he was signed to kind of makes that a little more difficult. They still have the room to bring him back on that long-term extension. But, again, not a big worry. I think he will get extended. And I think it's a pretty fair signing.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they didn't sign him, Mir Johnson, with the intent that he's going to rebound or actually block shots. He was a part of that Boston Celtics team last year, which struggled to grab any rebound off the glass. I saw him shoot a couple threes last year. That was earth-shattering. The earth actually may be flat after all. But, he's a nice, serviceable player. God forbid somebody gets hurt. If Okafor becomes unplayable, Amir Johnson can play a little bit of a stretch. Well, not really a stretch five, but I mean, in the new age of small ball, anything's possible. But at the stretch four position, he does actually like to run around a lot at the top of the key for whatever reason. But it's a nice deal for $11 million on this young team.
Yeah, and the fact that it's another short-term deal keeps the cap flexibility, and like we mentioned, Embiid's health is somewhat of a concern, so at least he's a veteran to have around. They also signed James Michael McAdoo, and they signed a former draft pick. Matt, help me with his name. Furkan
Korkmaz.
Okay, Korkmaz. That's an interesting one. But what are your thoughts on these two? What can they provide the Sixers this season?
James Michael McAdoo is a name that they signed, so it could give fans a fun thing to say out loud, maybe. I mean, I'm not expecting a ton from him. I think, on the Warriors team, he just kind of would come in if Zaza Pachulia punched somebody in the throat and had to get taken out of the game. That was kind of his role if he ever got spot minutes on the team. So I'm not expecting a ton. If I see something, it would be awesome. But it's a two-way contract. I think he'll spend most of that on the in the G League. So not expecting a ton from James Michael McAdoo. But Korkmaz is my absolute guy. I'm really excited about him. He looks so much like a more maybe modernized Manu Ginobili, and I know that's kind of a bold thing to say, but he can stretch the floor, and that's what I was really expecting when they first took him. He just seems like a guy who could shoot, move off screens, spread the floor, a nice little late first round addition. But the summer league and following up on his highlights, he can handle, man. He runs a couple pick and rolls. He can attack off of somebody closing out on him. He showed that there's a little bit of pizzazz in his game that maybe I wasn't expecting to begin with. He had some weird super European finishes at the rim where they spin it off the top right corner of the backboard. It was just kind of cool to see that he had more to his game than I was expecting.
So my thoughts on these two guys are rather quick. McAdoo, obviously being on the Warriors, he's been around a winning culture. I do think that kind of stuff matters. Even though he's young, he's still been around things that work out and have won championships. So I do like that dynamic he can bring to the Sixers. I don't think he gets a boatload of minutes unless there's injuries. And then, Furkan Korkmaz, which is probably a top 5 name in the outside of that, I saw some YouTube highlight reel I watched. And like you said, Matt, he definitely has a couple moves. We'll see how that translates over into the NBA. It's weird seeing a guy who was born in 1997. I was just like, God damn, I'm getting old. I mean, this entire roster, most of these guys are my age or younger, which just blows my mind in general.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. But talk to pictures.
You guys got me feeling young over here. That's a year younger than me.
And you guys, I just want to mention one more thing. Did you guys see that there could be more talent coming to the Sixers? The 80s Sixers, the Delaware G League team, is having open tryouts to the public.
Oh, let's get in there.
Matt, let's see you sign up. Let's get over there.
Time. What the Sixers need is a pale ginger, dude. They need it.
You could throw oop to Embiid. Everybody can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's talk departures. The Sixers didn't really lose anybody overall that's going to impact their season. Gerald Henderson, Sergio Rodriguez, Thiago Splitter. Anything really stick out to you?
I kind of like Thiago Splitter. Maybe personally, I don't think he's good at basketball really, but he seemed like a cool dude.
He's got a cool name too, so
that's a fairly good name. This should just be the name podcast, and we'll just go through names and decide if we like them. But I mean, no, nothing really there that I think is going to affect them next year. I like Gerald Henderson. I thought he offered a lot of what they got with JJ Redick just in terms of veteran leadership. But not a ton of losses there. It's really been a summer of additions for them.
Adios. Why wasn't it Okafor added to this list? I mean, it's none of these guys are a loss. I doubt anyone's going to hold their head 5 years down the line and say they regretted letting anyone from this group of players being added back to the free agency pool go.
Yeah, I think, if they didn't sign some other veterans to kind of replace these guys in the locker room, I think it might have mattered. But since they brought in some guys that are more talented on the court, I think it'll have a bigger impact anyways. But let's talk predictions. Let's talk starters. Who's starting for the Sixers on opening night?
So my prediction, I'm going Markelle Fultz, JJ Redick, Robert Covington, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid. Maybe a notable omission out of there that some people are wrongfully thinking that Dario should be in the starting lineup. Listen, I love Dario. He is my large adult son who is like 4 years older than me. But he's just not a good mesh for the fit for the starting lineup. And Robert Covington is literally made to start alongside these guys. He's a menace defensively. He's going to space the floor. Him and JJ Redick will offer a ton of spacing for Joel and Ben and Markelle to create and do their thing on offense. And I just think each player fits such a good role. This is a weirdly well-rounded starting lineup for a Sixers team. Markelle, like Kory said earlier, he can score in isolation. He'll get you a bucket. JJ will space the floor, run off screens, have gravity coming off of that. Robert Covington, for the reasons I said. Ben Simmons can be your 6'11" point guard, and then Joel is there to just kind of play foundationally around him. And it's a pretty solid starting lineup.
It really is. For me, I'm going pretty much exactly the same, actually. Fultz at the 1, JJ at the 2, Covington at the 3. I think they go small with Ben Simmons at the 4, and Joel Embiid is healthy and on the court for the 5.
Yeah, I think you have to go with Simmons at the 4 because he's such a talented player, and the hype with him being number one pick and stuff like that. It just makes so much sense. And Matt, like you said, this roster projects the workout so well if everybody's healthy and kind of executes their. And that could be a really interesting thing for the Sixers. And it's not something we've necessarily seen in the past. And I mean, when was the last time you've seen a lineup like this?
I'm not going to lie. I can't think of, it's just such a perfect modernized lineup. There's shooting, there's ball handling, there's defense. It's just, this has got to be one of the better, if all works out, this has got to be one of the most, I'll say that, not better. I'll say the lineup with the most potential that the Sixers have had. And I can't tell you since when.
An interesting thing I'm thinking about right now is last year the Sixers ranked 5th in pace with 98.5. Adding Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, and Markelle Fultz to this starting 5. I mean, this team could honestly be a top 3 team in pace next year with how young they are.
Yeah, for sure. And they did struggle offensively. Offensive rating, I think, was last in the league. Adding some offensive, talented rookies and having him be, at least for 60 or 70 games would just be huge. But talking Embiid, let's talk breakout starter. Who's breaking out from the starting lineup for the Sixers this year?
For this one, I had to go with Ben Simmons. I feel like he's been slept on so much because he broke his foot. It's talented. It's just so insane that so many people are kind of looking him off just from 1 year of away from his LSU dominance. He didn't have a ton of team success, but team and talk to that coach. That's not a real basketball team. And maybe it wasn't the greatest decision to go there, but while he was there, he really showed he can handle the ball. And it's not just, hey, he's tall, he can dribble a little bit. It's this guy has point guard level handles. And he can pass the ball. He's a savant passing. He can score at the rim. He's insane at drawing fouls. He had some ridiculous free throw rate. I don't have it on hand right now, but he had a great free throw rate and just so many things that he can do. I don't see him having maybe a Joel Embiid level impact just because I don't think he's quite there defensively, but on offense, I think he could be a mismatch every single night.
The more you talk about Ben Simmons, the more I worry about my Rookie of the Year pick. But I'm rolling with Joel Embiid. I think, going down with an injury last year, that had to have killed him, especially with how hard it's been for him to get on the floor and then finally getting on the floor, silencing all the critics and showing that this guy, belongs in the NBA. I do think hopefully he stays healthy. And I think if he does stay healthy, this guy's going to put the league on notice. I think we're going to see a very hungry Embiid. Embiid has such a confidence to him. such a young age and only playing 31 NBA games, this guy already has that superstar type of confidence in him. I mean, off the court, he's probably already an MVP social media user, constantly hitting on top like models and Rihanna. You know, the guy's great, and I think next year with the talent around him, it's going to make his life just so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Ben Simmons is a great choice as well. I just think Embiid, it's kind of like almost an easy choice because we already know what we're getting with Embiid. Long as he's healthy, I think, he established himself as top 10, top 5 center in the NBA. And just having more talented players around him is going to make his life a lot easier. Like you said, Kory, I think, this could really work out. But Ben Simmons, I also think is a great choice because it just tells you how much talent is in the Sixers starting lineup, because you could have easily said someone like a Markelle Fultz as well.
Who do you guys take, Joel Embiid or Nikolai Jokic from the Nuggets?
Oh, Joel Embiid. I don't even have to think about it. Jokic is. I want to hear Nick. Nick, good. I want to hear what you say.
Well, I think obviously the biggest deciding factor in this would be health. Yeah, I'll take Embiid over Jokic, but if Embiid isn't healthy, it depends on what you're getting, because I think Jokic, obviously is going to establish himself as, one of the top 5 centers if he hasn't already. With this is a really unique ability because you don't necessarily have a player like him who's not super athletic, and we're so used to athletes dominating the NBA, and he kind of dominates it with skill. So that's really interesting. But if Embiid's healthy, I'm going with Embiid.
Fair enough. I'm also wrong with Embiid. I know that's a very popular topic on Twitter. I thought it was,
yeah,
pretty
I think
ideal
Jokic is a great player, though. I think some people have brought this up on Twitter. It's just like a fine line of people either overhyping him or underhyping him. I think, we'll kind of have a better idea of what he can do this season, especially, playing the full year and then having Paul Millsap by his side.
Yeah, and I'm not disparaging what Jokic can do. The guy was insane. I'm pretty sure the Nuggets had the best offense in the league, and he was probably the biggest part of that. But
yeah, he was their
it's really on
point.
the other side of yeah, exactly. And it's on the other side of the ball, really. You can pull Nikola Jokic out to guard a pick and roll, and it's gonna go not great for the Denver Nuggets. But, I think he actually defended the rim maybe decently. He might be an average level defender when he tops out as peak. And if you're an average level defender and a phenomenal offensive player, you're a great top 15 player. But if you're a Joel Embiid and you can be a defensive player of the year and average 24 a game, that you're on a whole other planet.
Yeah, I think that's what separates them, is the athletic ability, and that kind of what holds Jokic back, because no matter how smart you are, positioning wise and stuff, you're facing a better athlete sometimes. It's just really hard to, defend them. And Embiid kind of has those athletic gifts, which Jokic doesn't. But let's talk breakout bench guy for the Sixers.
For this one, I went with my guy, Sauce Castillo, Nick Stauskas. Are you guys familiar with the Sauce Castillo nickname?
Yeah, I actually remember it's from all the way from Sacramento, correct?
Yeah, it was like the closed captioning for some reason. Instead of calling his name Nick Stauskas, the dude just wrote Sauce Castillo, which is literally the coolest thing that could ever happen. Like, imagine you're in the first day of class and your professor's calling out names, and there's a dude Sauce Castillo in your class. Like, I am boys with that guy immediately, asking him where he goes out on weekends. Like, that'd be insane. But anyway, I just think Nick has a really huge opportunity to fill a simple role. And when you're filling a simple role at an elite level, you're a good player. I think he'll come off the bench as maybe an 8th man, 9th man, 15, 16, 17 minutes a game, and just space the floor and second, third ball handler on the court. And that's all he's got to do. Just, space the floor, shoot a good percentage, be able to relieve the point guard or the ball handler on the floor at the time. And I think Nick's going to be able to do that, and he finally feel comfortable with his role in the NBA this year.
Man, I hope that the Sauce what's the nickname?
Sauce Castillo.
Sauce Castillo. I hope he has a great season, just so that name can be said more times than not. That's a good one. For me, I'm rolling with a guy that, if you heard this podcast to this point, is already putting me on a kill list. I'm rolling with Okafor. No. I think this is a good year for Okafor to have a nice season off the bench. I mean, credibility completely out the window at this point. I just think, there hasn't been an added pressure to him because, Embiid has been in and out. Ben Simmons was out. There wasn't a guard like Markelle Fultz. There wasn't a veteran like JJ Redick. I think having a lot of talent around him will really take away the pressure of being the number 3 pick overall in the 2015 draft. I don't think Okafor will be a starter. I still don't think he's going to be very good on defense, but maybe he can be more engaged. If you're winning basketball games, maybe, on defense, he runs to the basket for a little bit harder for a block. Offensively, I do think coming off the second unit with Dario, TJ McConnell has shown that he's a pretty good, decent point guard, even when he has to step up. Like you said, Nick's I'm not going to say the nickname. I'm not ready yet. I'm not worthy. Him in the corner, ready to shoot threes. I think Okafor could be like a type of a Greg Monroe guy off the bench who can give you, 12 to 13 points while giving you, a handful of rebounds. And defensively, you're going to have to live or die with him getting beat or not.
Yeah, damn, Kory. Okafor, if he is listening right now, I'll be really excited with you, but I don't think he'll be a fan anyways. But Sauce Castillo, I thought he had probably his best season in the NBA with the Sixers last year, but I'm going to go with the easy one. You guys kind of threw me a oop off the glass. And Dario Saric, the other Sixer player who almost won Rookie of the Year. So I think, with the ability that he's shown last season when Embiid was out, I think he'll do a great job with the second unit.
Yeah, for sure.
We all had to pick somebody different. We needed it. It was due.
Keep it interesting. But let's talk wins. Best case scenario for the Sixers next year.
Best case scenario, I really think Joel plays, 65, 70 games. And, the ones that he does miss are just kind of those rest games, no real misses because of a serious injury or anything. If you could get Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz as the Rookie of the Year, just not that the award really matters because Michael Carter-Williams won Rookie of the Year and look where he's at. But Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz having a Rookie of the Year season is showing that they have a lot of potential. And maybe a Robert Covington, Joel Embiid, all defense. I think that's a pretty fair thing to not expect, but to hope for. And if all goes well, they're probably a 5th or 6th seed in the playoffs, and I think they could maybe take a series. If they get matched up against maybe a Raptors team or a Wizards team, I could see them maybe taking it to 7. But it's not as much the win total as just finally seeing the product give some result and give some tangible hope, and not just these predictions and the foresight and the potential.
Yeah, best case scenario for me is 46 wins. That's Rookie of the Year coming from either Ben Simmons, who I'm fearing more and more, and Markelle Fultz. That's Embiid being healthy. That's a lot of things going right. With all these rookies, there's going to be growing pains. I think we'd all be pretty naive to think that they're just going to come in and all dominate, all gel. It's possible. Hell, crazier things have happened. But I think best case scenario is 46 wins, and we just see this team in the first time Philly's been in the playoffs for a couple of years, and Philly loves their basketball, and it'd be a good time.
Yeah, I think best case, like you said, I think obviously the whole season kind of revolves around Joel Embiid's health and the development of the young guys. If they make the jumps that you want to see, by the time the end of the season comes, I think they could probably hit 44 wins, grab one of those lower seeds in the Eastern Conference, and make the playoffs and definitely get some good experience. I don't really know how far they could push a team in the playoffs, especially with their lack of experience, but you never know. But worst case for the Sixers next year, what's the worst possible thing that could happen, Matt?
It's really just got to be if Joel's injured, that's going to be a huge blow to everything the Sixers are building on. If he has some sort of season-ending injury or he misses 30 games in the middle of the season because of an injury, you really have to start worrying about him entering that kind of Greg Oden territory. I don't think he's there quite yet. There's been a lot of different random variables to his injury history. It hasn't been really one consistent thing keeping him out. So that maybe gives a little hope somehow, ironically. But, I think if he's injured, if Markelle and Ben don't really perform, if, something happens that re-aggravates Ben's foot and, they miss the playoffs and they're kind of reeling and not really sure of the direction anymore, that could take a lot of the steam out of the Sixers train.
What about you, Kory?
Worst case scenario is still better than last year for me. I think worst case scenario is they win 35 games. I have a hard time believing that if someone gets hurt, that all 3 of them miss time. Even if Embiid misses time and goes down, they obviously I think fall out of the playoff picture. But I think Simmons and Fultz could probably do enough to keep them rather competitive and at least highlight more of their skills more. or vice versa, like you said, Matt, if Ben Simmons re-aggravates that foot injury, or if anyone else goes down. Do you think there's enough young talent to keep his team right around the mid-30s?
Yeah, I think worst case scenario, like you guys have mentioned, is the injury. And, we talked about it a lot on this podcast. If Embiid were to go down, I don't know how confident I am in the rest of the guys on this roster because they're not proven yet, and it would be a lot easier if Embiid was there. So I have them, maybe low 30s, high 20s, just everything goes terrible. The rookies don't take the jumps you want them to see, and, it's just another year for the Sixers. But really, what's going to happen next year for them?
Next year, I have them right at about 42 wins. I think Joel will play, and not even if all goes well, I think it's a fair guess to say he plays maybe 55, 60 games, and that's, I'm comfortable with that amount, assuming that the other 20 are some miscellaneous injuries and, a bunch of rest nights. I really, truly believe Ben's going to win Rookie of the Year. I just feel like he's just not a rookie to me. If you've seen him, he's just a grown man. He's so much more physically developed, and he's had maybe not a year playing in the league, but he's had a year to be a part of the league and understand some of the workings of it. So he has a leg up in that regard. And with Ben winning Rookie of the Year, I think Markelle Fultz will have a lot of nice moments. I think, like I said earlier, he'll show you some things where you'll kind of be like, I can't believe he just did that, and some things maybe not as good. But I do think he'll struggle at points, and he'll sit probably a few crunch time moments, and they might replace him with some veteran point guard play because they might be looking for a playoff seed and at the expense of some Markelle development. And I think that puts him right around a 7th seed, 8th seed. And I think it's a competitive 7th seed, 8th seed. I think if it's a Cavs series, it's, a competitive sweep, as they almost always are in the East. And if it's maybe a Raptors or a Wizards, I could really see it going 5, 6, 7 games.
Man, why am I like the high Sixers guy for some reason on this podcast? My prediction is 43 wins, so 1 win higher than the Sixers guy. I think, your Ben Simmons. I feel like we're like going against each other in our Rookie of the Year speeches here. You got Ben Simmons. I keep pushing the Fultz. Nick, you got to push him Embiid after this probably. We got. I think Fultz comes out. I think he averages, like I said, by the stat line, 17, 4, and 5. I think Ben does well. We have to see how Ben's jump shot is. I'm losing confidence. My voice is getting a little shaky here. Might have to quit this call rather soon. And I do think this team, though, I think they stay healthy. I'm going to say that Embiid finally has the foot right. The knee stays healthy. This is a team that's going to get an 8 seed, possibly a 7 seed. I think there's a possibility they can, squeeze up there. And in the first round, we see a very fun youth team going against either the King himself or the guys who want to dethrone the King and Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I think you guys are pretty close. I have them, at 41 and 41. I think, it'll be like they could have some struggles early on, like you mentioned. The rookie's kind of developing, but by the time the season ends, they'll be a better team than what records because the talent will develop a little bit more. I could see things not going perfectly for them early on, and I have them grabbing, one of those low seeds in the East. I mean, like you said, I think most likely it's going to be a competitive sweep unless they were to get lucky in a matchup or, if they ended up with, I don't even want to say Toronto or Washington because I'm pretty high on both those teams, and I think like the lack of playoff experience would hurt the Sixers in the playoffs, but it's a much needed experience that they'll get this year.
Definitely.
Let's talk truth. So Emoji today for the Sixers is, the opening hands to like the shining light. Like you can finally see the light. You trusted the process, and the process is finally paying off.
That's pretty good. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Nick always keep it consistent with the solid emojis.
Love it. Are you guys familiar with Bitmoji?
Yes.
All right. There's a Bitmoji. I'm changing the game here, fellas. There's a Bitmoji where you can get your little dude doing like a dab, like dabbing with like the fire behind him.
Yes.
And that could be that's a 2-sided sword for me. I put a lot of thought into this, an irrational amount of thought into this. It's either he's dabbing with the flames, like, the Sixers are so good this year, they're fired, they're so good, or it's like a dab and it's going up in flames, the season's gone horrendous, and I'm still chilling doing a dab. So it's kind of showing how volatile the Sixers are this year.
All right, so I'm going with the another dual emoji. It's the happy face and like the crying face, like the stage mask from the 1400s where Shakespeare was doing his thing. So I think this season can go one of two ways. Either everything's going to be happy in Philly, the process will be fantastic. Sam Hinkie will have a statue built, and we'll be talking about how the Sixers are finally on pace of being probably, if not the best, one of the best core, the best core in the NBA. And then sad face, everything we've talked about for about, the last hour or so, 47,000 times about if Embiid gets hurt or something like that, will be a little bit sad going into the end of next year.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't used that one yet. The happy and the sad face, like the theater one. It seems like an easy one to use for a lot of teams. But, that talks about the Sixers season. Well, at least, going in, there is that young talent there. Before we move on, Matt, I know you're working on a piece on young cores. Kory, you mentioned you think the Sixers are one of the top 3. Where would you put the Sixers, overall in terms of young core? 1, 2, or 3?
I'm gonna out Sixers fan Kory here. I put them pretty firmly entrenched at number 1, and that was in front of cores like a Giannis, Chris Middleton, Jabari Parker, and in front of Alonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, those kinds of cores. Just because, if you look at it, Giannis is a world eater. That guy's one of the best players in the NBA already. But then Chris Middleton and Jabari Parker, are they really going to be huge difference-making players? And that's the difference between teams like that and the Sixers, where maybe not Markelle to an extent. I think Markelle is, tops out of like an all-star level player, which is a total spoil of riches, the fact that I'm kind of saying that as if it's not as good. But with guys like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, I think you have two guys who can legitimately be MVP candidates. I really think they can be franchise-altering, franchise-level talents, and they're both on the same team, on the same timeline.
I definitely think this is better than the Lakers core. The Lakers core has a lot of question marks, I think. Are the Timberwolves in this debate anymore? Probably not, because they got rid of Levine, because now they got rather veteran talent around the two young guys. I'm going to say the Sixers are second. I'm actually going to roll with the Milwaukee Bucks core. I think Giannis is too much of a freak, too much of a gift. He looks like a Greek god himself, and I think if Middleton can stay healthy, I love Jabari Parker. I mean, last year those guys were really fun to watch. I think the Sixers are close, but just because the Bucks have been a little bit more proven to this point as well, I'll give it to Milwaukee.
And also, you got to throw in Malcolm Brogdon. Well, Malcolm Brogdon's not even that young, but Thon Maker is another nice young piece for them, potentially be a big time guy. But let's go to League Pass. What would you rank the Sixers 1 through 10 League Pass wise? Obviously, Matt, you're probably a 10 for 10 on this one, but what would you say for the casual NBA fan?
For a casual fan, I think I'm going to go with maybe an 8. I think an 8 is pretty fair. You're going to watch, Kory talked earlier, it's going to be a fast team. They're going to run up and down the court. You're going to see some transition dimes by Ben Simmons. You're going to see some ankle breakers with Markelle Fultz, and you're going to see Joel Embiid ending a guy's career on a dunk. It's going to be a lot to watch just on one team. So if the Warriors are a 9 or a 10, the Cavs are a 9 or a 10, I think the Sixers sit at an 8, maybe with some different criteria, but I think they sit at an 8.
Well, I must have sobered up, and I think Matt must have took 4 shots within the last half hour. 8 eight's a little high for me. I'm gonna tie my second highest or my highest league pass besides the Pacers, which obviously are at 10 for me at all times. I'm gonna go with a 6. I do think there's a lot of intriguement. I mean, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz. I mean, I could repeat all my sentiments from earlier in the show. This core is my second favorite.
Repeat
core.
The Jaleel one.
Trash. What? He could be the next Greg Monroe, whatever that's worth. I mean, Greg Monroe gets paid, so that's not the worst case scenario for Okafor. But yeah, I think it's a 6. This is definitely going to be, especially because of the pace, like we mentioned earlier. This team was 5th in pace, and Nick, like you mentioned, they were last in offensive rating. They're not going to be that bad next year. There's no way this team finishes last. You got too many bad teams in the Hawks and the Bulls. But pace-wise, they'll be right around 5th, if not better, with the young and the aggressiveness of Ben Simmons and Fultz. They're definitely going to be a league pass team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think I have them probably at a 6 as well, with the potential maybe to get to a 7. Obviously, I have a little bit of a skewed scale, but I think, the 6, the young talent is there. Like we mentioned, the pace is going to be high. It kind of depends on health, like we mentioned before. But Embiid's always a player you want to watch play, not only for his on-court product, but just like personality he brings to the Sixers.
Definitely.
You would watch the Sixers over what TV show that you like?
I would say, I'm not a big TV guy, but The Office is probably the best television show of all time, or at least up there. Best comedy show, we'll say. So I would watch the Sixers over The Office.
Sorry, I'm stunned.
How do you feel about that,
I'm
Kory?
stunned. All right, moving on. So.
I'm curious now. What do you got? What's the best comedy show?
I'm going with F is for Family. I don't know if you guys ever heard this Netflix original.
Yeah, I watched that.
It's with Bill Burr. It's a little bit of a darker comedy since it's pretty realistic with how a dad would talk. I feel like in the middle 70s. It's a very funny show, but with this young core, I can't sit and watch something make me laugh when I can watch so much young talent.
Yeah, honestly, like this is the first time that anybody's ever picked a show that I had written down before. So I'm going to go with The Office as well because that's what I did have that's down. And, it's not that I hate The Office, but I am definitely intrigued by the Sixers a little bit. But I also already watched The Office before, so I'm not going to rewatch it. Sorry. I know that one really hurts you. You got, double daggers today.
You know what? It's respectable. I think just the fact that we're at 19, I'm taking with the number more than the team. This team may be ranked 19th, but this team has the potential to be a 14. And The Office was intriguing to watch back in the day, and why not the Sixers?
He's really trusting the process, Matt. So you definitely did a good job today. Thank you guys for hopping on. Thank you, as always, for everybody listening. We'll catch you next time.
Awesome. See you guys later.